and sisters, I've come to the end of the road. This is the final lecture. I've created a festive atmosphere. The chocolates are about surviving and also about doing your survey. Please do your survey because we really want to know what you felt about the course and what we can do better. It's really important to us that we improve every year because for a lot of you, this is the first ever time you think about global law and we want to make sure that we're doing it properly for the next group. So dig deep, be altruistic, win the money, all of that stuff. We'd be really grateful. All right, so before we start, let's talk about self-care. So if you have any people in your life who owe you a favour, now is the time to call it in. You want hot meals, you want walks, you want reassuring noises. You know, it's time to call in your networks to say, next couple of weeks are going to be a little rough. I want all your support. Okay, so you're not in this alone. All of you have got support networks of some kind or other, and you've definitely got us, the professional community, to support you. So I really mean it. We do not want anyone going through exams and not surviving out the other side well. Like, this is not meant to test every part of you in terms of character. It's not like you're not going over the top in a battle. This is meant to be challenging, but not so difficult that you can't manage, yeah? So, really mean it. Look after yourselves. Eat, sleep, walk, have bubble baths, be nice to each other. All right, so we are revising. You all know when the exam is? That's a good start. 8 a.m. Who's a morning person? Saturday. Who's not up for it? Saturday. All right. Yeah. So, basically, here we are. You are at your final lecture of your second trimester. That's all gravy from here on. So, this is what we've been trying to achieve in this course. We're trying to let you know what it means to be a global lawyer in this particular moment in which you're living and the profession of which you're about to join. So we want you to be globally aware legal professionals, basically, have boundary-free minds when it comes to the way the world works. So we asked you right at the beginning that you're at your firm in the Gold Coast and your client wants to know what international law is, what the hell a reservation to a treaty is, you know, what does trade law look like, because you're working on this $1 million highway between Cambodia and Vietnam with your team. And your boss tells you that Cambodia has a civil law system and she asks you what that means, right? Or you're working at a community legal centre, client is planning to take her children to the UK to get away from her husband, and you want to know what the international treaty about child abduction law says here in Australia. Or you work for DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and you want to advise about peaceful options to resolve Russia's use of force and subsequent occupation of parts of the Ukraine. Right, so this is the kind of careers we're trying to prepare you for, and whatever pathway you take, you're going to need to know what the framework is for dealing with these global issues. So now you know something about the different types of legal systems that are used all over the world. You've got some idea of where to start. You know something about what public international law is, what customary international law is, what treaties there are, how they apply in Australia, some idea about how to resolve international disputes. And you know that there's a lot of actors in this space. So you now know about NGOs and companies and individuals all messed up in international law, whether they're trying to influence treaty negotiations or supporting complaints in human rights courts or part of an international commercial arbitration. So we're going to today do a really high level overview of what you've learned in this course. And I'm really hoping that some of it looks familiar, otherwise you're going to have an interesting couple of weeks. All right, you have to do more work on your own, but we have basically decided to help you out as much as we can by this revision lecture, and also in your workshops, you're doing a practice exam. So my JDs have just done their practice exam in their workshop, it's really important to get a sense of strategy and to just apply what you've learned to the questions. It will really help you. So I highly recommend that you get to the workshops this week. And I'm going to give you some tips now about the exam. Oh, get your attention. All right. Here is what it looks like. Okay, so you get 2 hours. You get 10 minutes reading time. The exam is worth 40%, as you know. So some of you, lucky people, have already passed. Woo. That must feel good. Some of you only need to just knock a couple of short answer questions out of the park and you will pass. So I'm hoping that takes a lot of the pressure off the exams. So your reading time is incredibly important. You need to really use that time to structure your answers and figure out how you're going to organise yourself. So in the workshops, we're going to highly recommend that you can practice some reading time of what you're going to do, outlines, plans, making sure you answer exactly what the question is and you don't answer what you'd like the question to be, you answer what the question is. So you can bring your notes, you can bring articles, your readings, you can take a whole range of materials into the exam. You just need to know how to find the stuff you need, right? So there's no point taking heaps of stuff into the exam if you can't find the relevant piece of material you need for the question. So take a lot of time to organise your notes really well. All right, you definitely need the lectures, the seminar, preparations you need to know, and I will take the readings. There's some really good stuff in there. We set them for a reason, so at the very least, take those materials into the exam. All right, time is really important in an exam. It's a sprint, I'm afraid, not a marathon. So that's why being organised is really important, having as much in your head as you can so that you know exactly where to look. Not all the questions are as easy to all of us. So if you've divided up your time, so you've got 15 to 16 minutes per short answer question and one really stumps you, you need to have a plan about what you're going to do. So, you need to know, firstly, where the exam is and how to get there. That's really important. It's up to you, all right? So keep an eye on your exam timetable. It is your responsibility to get to the right place on time. And sometimes they change the venue, so just really keep an eye on your exam timetable. So generally speaking, in terms of time, you might want to spend an hour on short answers and an hour on hypothetical, but it's totally up to you. Just slightly more points for the short answers, so you might want to leave an extra 10 minutes for them. And then depth. I'm going to talk to you a lot about this. Those of you who've had me for workshops, what are you? You're a Pac-Man, or a Ms. Pac-Man. You are gobbling up the marks, right? You're not there to display anything other than what gives you marks. So I want you to have some strategy about what marks you're going to get per question. Right? Think. Right, gobble, gobble. Right. So that means in a 5-mark short answer question, I want 5 marks I can give you, right? So if you've only written a couple of sentences, you're not going to get 5 marks. So you have to be really thinking about how am I going to get 5 marks out of this short answer question and write to that very specifically. So this is like the seminar preparation where you're writing a page on each reading. You need to hit the highlights in a short space of time. This is why we get you to practice with one of those seminar readings. So you're going to be writing at least a page or 2 for the short answer questions. They need to give me 5 marks that I can give you out of that. So make sure you've got things of substance to say. And as we've said all along, the focus is on weeks 5 to 11. All right, a few things about the exams. Hello. Talking about exams. In the exam, you don't have to give a full citation. So we're not expecting AGLC referencing the exam. Just in brackets, give me the gist of it. ICJ statute, Vienna Convention, or just BC, LT will do on the law of treaties. Or you can just say Nicaragua, for example, or shell case. So just give me enough so that I know what you're talking about. Put it in brackets, underline it so I can tell that you're referring to a case. You can write in point form, we had a question about that before, but you must follow a structure, and I must, or myself or one of the other markers, must be able to read it so that it makes sense. So if it would only make sense to your roommate, it's not going to probably work. So you still need to have an answer to the question that is very clear. Having said that, headings and structure is really good. This is a 5-point answer. Here is my 5 points that, you know, or to be safe 6. That's a really good idea. So I can give you all the points. So the question here is not a word limit, it's a time limit. So you have to practice writing under pressure to a time limit. So this isn't anybody's first exam, is it? Is this their first? Probably most of you have been through law exam. We've all done one before, you've done fundamentals. Yeah. So the difference with this one is probably a little bit more conceptual than some of the other exams that you're going to be doing. It requires a bit more critical thought, possibly. So you're not just applying the case to the law, there's a little bit more complexity to international law, as you know, a little bit more politics. So have some time to really think and display your knowledge about what you've learned. So practice doing the short answer questions. So during the workshop, after you finish your workshop, go and practice actually doing it for real. See how much you can actually write in 15 minutes. See whether anyone else other than you can read it after you've done it. All right. Read the question. Don't answer what you wish was on the exam, but isn't. You really have to answer the question. A decent attempt at answering the question is better than going off on a tangent. Don't guess, work through it. Right? Use your logic. You're all smart. You're here for a reason. Work through it. And use the material we've given you. We have clearly asked you each week what we're trying to examine. So we've clearly outlined in each seminar and each lecture what we're trying to get you to understand. So take that seriously, go back over it and see if you really do understand each of the concepts. You have to identify the main topics raised. So it'll be clear whether something is a treaties question, treaties interpretation question, use of force question, customary international law question, a question about international arbitration, a question about the ICJ and its powers, a question about the Security Council and its powers. It'll be clear what we're trying to get out of you. So make sure you've organised your notes in a way that you'll give us what we need. Identify the primary material that you need to answer the question. So in law, as in all things, law comes first. So the sources of law, which law you're relying on, which source of law you're relying on. Is it a treaty? Is it customary international law? Is it state practice? What is it? Cases. You need to know cases for this course. We have talked about cases in every lecture from week 5 onwards, ICJ cases. So you need to know some of them. So make sure that you've got a few in your head. You know, what is the leading case in use of force? What is the leading case on customary international law? Use this primary material to identify and plan sub-issues. So if you know the rule is the use of force under the Charter, states cannot use the use of force against each other except in certain very exceptional circumstances, and you know what those exceptions are, and you know what the cases are that explain those exceptions, and you can work through it. So use the secondary material, so that's things like the readings, to check answers, help with analysis and evaluation, think about nuances. So, you know, I'd be taking the UN Charter in with me, I'd be taking the Vienna Convention in with me, tab it, so you know where everything is. If you've watched the Dugong video, you will know primary sources are really important in international law. Right? Type the ICJ statute in. Okay. How to do a hypothetical. It's okay. Hypotheticals are not designed to drive you crazy. You can do it basically under the Iraq method. So under your GLS skills, we've got a little video. So clarifying the issue, I like to just write down the answer, rephrase the question, make sure I've got an answer and figuring out what that is. So in other words, the state, I would advise this state that the use of force will only be lawful if they can adequately prove self-defense in this circumstance. In this case, they can't because 1, 2, 3, right? So answer the question. So then you note the rule, you apply the primary materials, and then you conclude by directly answering the question. Really have to have a conclusion. Our hypotheticals are phrased so that there's probably more than one right answer. Or, you know, the court doesn't always agree, there's dissenting judges, there's minority judgments. It doesn't matter so much the actual conclusion, what matters is the reasoning. This is a lot like maths in that sense. As long as your reasoning is all very clear and logical, the actual conclusion, you know, can be okay. As long as it's reasonable, right? One way or another. International law is not as simple as ticking a box. There are different interpretations, but you have to have a conclusion. Take a punt, be brave, decide what you think. You're going to get a mark for a conclusion, no matter what it is. So write one. And write one that makes sense based on your reasoning. So, subheadings, if they're substantive, are really useful and I would highly recommend. Use all the space you have. Paper is free. Go for it. You know, if you need a page per issue and you need to put headings on each page and you need to come back to things, that's fine. So organising materials in a particular way. Alright, so with the hypotheticals though, just be really clear about making sure you're giving us back what we've taught you in the class. Okay? So make sure you're giving us the rule and you're giving us the ICJ case and you're giving, you know, not opinion. It's got to be based on primary sources. Alright, so here we go. Week 5. Seems so long ago, isn't it? It's extraordinary. We did our first introduction to private and public international law. So we discussed in weeks 1 to 4, you remember the different types of legal systems out there and the fact that different countries have different types of laws. And then we thought about how to resolve situations where more than one country's laws might be relevant to the issue at hand if they conflict. So a global lawyer very often operates in a foreign country, it uses the domestic law of that country to help their clients. And we talked about this idea. So a manufacturer in Australia gets sued for selling a faulty product, but the component was made by a Chinese company and a Malaysian company. The case is brought before the Supreme Court of Queensland, and the court, using a French manufacturer, the court needs to know what to do with that case. We talked about how that raises the issue of private international law. We discussed questions of jurisdiction and forum, so where should the case be heard and under what circumstances. We talked about choice of law, which law will apply and why. We talked about recognition and enforcement of judgments. We also talked about, so that's what private international law does. It helps us solve disputes between states. So the sources of private international law are domestic laws, primarily, which set out the rules of working through a conflict of laws question. So we have the Foreign Judgment Act and so forth. These laws are found in the Constitution, legislation, and common law principles, and the answer for many private international law questions might be found in contracts. For example, between the Australian manufacturer company in Malaysia, the French manufacturer retailer in Queensland. But there's also treaties. So there's certain Hague Conventions about the abduction of children, for example, that form part of private international law. So then we introduced public international law. So this is about relationships between states. So another kind of jurisdiction here about the relationship between states. So instead of domestic laws colliding and conflicting, which is private international law, public international law is where states have agreed to work together to solve certain global problems. And we introduced some of the controversies around public international law, which is about whether it really is law, or is it a proper legal system if you can't enforce judgments particularly easily, and why states might obey international law. So what are the incentives and disincentives for states obeying something so nebulous? And we then introduced the sources of public international law, which are found in Article 38 of the ICJ statute. I can tell you, every international lawyer is always thinking about the sources of international law. That is an absolute no-brainer. core piece of information. Okay, good. Source of international law. Guaranteed going to be important. So, it says the sources of international law are conventions, customary international law, the general principles of international law, and some of the subsidiary meanings, such as writings by eminent publicists and judicial decisions. So, judicial decisions in the international law system are a subsidiary, not a primary source, which is very different to all your other law subjects. So, in our case, the cases, the court cases are just helpful. They don't decide issues in the same way as with domestic court cases. So even ICJ decisions are only binding on the parties to the case under Article 59 of the ICJ statute. Let's go over this too. Alright, so in week 6 and 7, we went into each of these sources of law in much more detail. Alright, so treaties. Treaties are really important, of course, and for treaties, you need the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties, right? So that's going to be your primary source of material that you would take into the exam. And treaties apply to states and international government organisations, and obliquely, or in a subsidiary way, non-state actors. So, the Vienna Convention talks you through how treaties are made and how to interpret them. So in week 6, we also talked about what is a state. And we made reference to the Montevideo Convention 1933, Article 1. So state should possess the following qualifications. Remember this? Permanent population, defined territory, a working government, and capacity to enter into relations with other states. And then we also introduced the UN, that exciting body, complicated body. And then we also talked about the role of NGOs in trying to influence international law. So having discussed who makes international law, we concentrated on the sources, beginning with treaties. So it's a very primary source of international law under Article 38(1)(a). We discussed that treaties are formal agreements between states that are intended to be binding, and they can be called a whole range of other things. It can be called conventions, pacts, agreements, charters, many other names. So we introduced the Treaty of Treaties, the Vienna Convention. It represents customary international law as well, because it codifies what was custom about entering into agreements between states. So it's both custom and a treaty. So it is binding on all states, even if they're not parties to the Vienna Convention, but most of them are. We talked about the definitions in Article 2 in particular, like what is a reservation, for example. We talked about peremptory norms and what those are, use coding norms. We talked about obligations under treaties under Article 1821. And we also talked about Article 30 when treaties conflict with each other. So the later one will prevail to the extent it's inconsistent with the first. That's the rule. Very similar to contract law or equity or any of the other principles. So we talked about Article 31, that you need to interpret a treaty in good faith with the ordinary meaning in light of its object and purpose. So very similar to general statutory interpretation principles. But something quite different to international law is this idea of peremptory norms, Article 53. Treaties that violate a use code norm, so genocide, slavery, apartheid, will be void. So that is quite special to international law. We talked about reservations, talked about how states might sign a full treaty, but they might make a reservation on a particular article in the treaty, and it's made by a state when they're signing or approving or acceding to a treaty where it says we will not be bound by that particular part of the treaty. So the state says, okay, we'll join, but we don't like Article X, or we will modify Article X to mean Y. States are free to make reservations, except where the treaty prohibits them, or the reservation is incompatible with the object and purpose of the treaty under Article 19C. Article 21 talks about when other states reject or object to a reservation, which they're allowed to do. So if a state objects, it can declare its objection and say it does not want to enter into a treaty relationship with the state making a reservation, or it can refuse to accept the reservation, but not objecting to entering the treaty. So why do we allow reservations at all? Part of it is to understand there's inequities between the power and developing status of many states. So perhaps a state wants to provide housing to refugees, but is not in a state of its development where it can. So Papua New Guinea is allowed to put a reservation on the right to housing under the Refugee Convention. But the rest of the community really wants Papua New Guinea to have a refugee status determination system because it has borders with refugee producing countries. So it's very important that Indonesia is encouraged to sign the Refugee Convention, Papua New Guinea is encouraged to sign the Refugee Convention and allows a reservation. So that's the kind of idea. And the idea is in future as Papua New Guinea becomes a richer country, becomes a more powerful country, it will lift that reservation over time. And we gave an example of that being Australia's reservation to CEDAW, where it didn't allow women in frontline military roles, and it's just lifted that reservation in the process of it. So basically, we talked a lot about treaties. We did a lot in the workshops on treaties as well. So we're pretty sure there's going to be something on treaties. All right, week 7. Super exciting, customary international law. This is the hypothetical you're going to do in your practice exam. We find that people struggle a little bit with customary international law because it is extremely specific to international law, public international law. So what is it? International custom as evidence of general practice accepted by law. It has 2 elements: extensive and virtually uniform state practice, and opinio juris as expressed by states. We talked about how to treat acquiescence, objection, and breaches, including persistent objectors, and we talked about how to think about the general principles as a source of law. So, quite a lot of this is complicated. You need to work through, in a fact situation in particular, what facts support particular types of state practice and what facts support particular types of opinio juris. So the North Sea Continental Shelf case, for example, held that a degree of consistency in state practice must be extensive and virtually uniform. So in an exam, if you're going to say state practice exists here because it is extensive and virtually uniform, you would put in nice little brackets, North Sea Continental Shelf case, underline close brackets. And that's all we'd expect for referencing in the exam. Just to give you an example. The practice must be in general uniform. So too much fluctuation means that custom is not being built, and that you get that from the Anglo-Norwegian fisheries case. But it need not be complete uniformity of practice. So in the asylum case, the rite of passage case, they say that the required degree of consistency is higher to prove a local custom, basically complete uniformity. So good evidence of state practice comes from the following sources: state legislation, judicial decisions, statements at the UN General Assembly, conduct in the form of processes that apply by the public service and by leaders, press releases, submissions to conventions, military activities, voting records at the UN, resolutions which are unanimous, particularly at the General Assembly or the Security Council. So if you see the word unanimous anywhere in your exam, highlight it, underline it, leap up and down. Unanimous resolutions means state practice. Proof of state practice has the following elements: duration of the practice, consistency, reputation of the practice, the number of states involved, the importance of those states. So if all the superpowers are doing it, that's important. And evidence of acquiescence or lack of protest. So in regards to state practice, people tend to find pretty logical. Opinio juris is a little bit more difficult. So here, you need to show that states are acting in a particular way because they believe it to be legally binding or a legal principle. So they don't follow practice for reasons of political expediency. This can be really quite difficult to prove. Opinio juris is often a much more mixed bag than state practice. But in the Nicaragua case, the ICJs tend to look for similar sorts of evidence to state practice and opinio juris, so legislation, all of that. But the point about state practice is what states have done. The point about opinion in juris is what they say publicly, why they acted that way, and what states think the law is. So what you're looking for is statements to say, this state thinks the law is this, right, in a hypothetical exam situation. So in the exam, you want to identify and go through each piece of evidence and suggest whether it provides good evidence for customary international law or not. So it's a weighing up exercise. So I'd expect to see state practice, strong or weak, opinio juris, strong or weak, balanced up, on balance, customary international law is fulfilled or not. And then you go through the other factors like duration and so forth. So particularly in relation to duration, in a hypothetical question, always underline the dates. Dates are important. If states have been doing something for 6 years, it's more influential than if they've been doing it for 6 months. So underline dates. But having said that, there's no rigid time requirement. It just needs to show that practice has been followed. Evidence of acquiescence, for example, if a state does not protest, is important. And then there's the controversial doctrine of a persistent objector. If a state has constantly protested against a particular principle, some might say Australian silence law is in this particular basket, then it might say that it's not held to that principle of customary international law. And why is that? Because international law is about sovereignty and consent. Sovereignty and consent. I've said that every lecture. I need you to really feel it. Sovereignty and consent. Alright, so you can't, states consent to international law, they can't be forced into international law. Okay, so then we also discussed the general principles, Article 38(1)(c) as a source of law. So for this, the ICJ's addressed ideas like estoppel, good faith, the obligation to provide reparation. So it's about general legal principles as to what is fair. And then we talked about the subsidiary sources of international law. There's things like ICJ decisions, things like the writings of eminent publicists, highly regarded scholars, the International Law Commission, and so forth. We also discussed what happens when different international law conflicts. So if there's two treaties that say different things, or a conflict between treaty and customary international law, which is quite common. And remember, we came up with our rules. Lex posterior, the rule which is later in time prevails. Lex specialis, specialist rule, trumps the general rule, and use Kogan's trumps everything, right? So these are very similar to the legal principles in domestic law, so I'm hoping that you can figure those out. So the later prevails, special prevails, use Kogan's prevails. All right. So that was in a nutshell, week 7, there was a lot. Week 8, we talked about peaceful dispute resolution. This is the point of the UN. The UN exists, so international law exists so that states can live with each other, generally. The UN exists from around World War III. Why it was designed, and it's the whole wrestling picture of why it exists. So, you will need to know what the UN Charter says, particularly around use of force. So I would take the UN Charter in with you, or at least the bits that are relevant that we keep talking about in our lectures and workshops. And then particularly Article 2, Article 33. So we started with the voluntary mechanisms in week 9. We noted that the UN Charter requires member states to resolve disputes peacefully, and all of you have just done this in your online memo, and they're going really well so far. We nearly finished the marking, and pretty much everyone's got between 14 and 19, so it's going well. And that was a key part of the memo, that states have to negotiate their differences peacefully. And then the other key part, which I keep telling you to tattoo on yourself somewhere, is that the UN Charter prohibits the threat of use of force by states other than in individual or collective self-defence, right? Which is covered in Article 51, which we talk about later. So in terms of how to resolve their disputes, under Article 3, Any dispute which is likely to endanger the maintenance of international peace and security shall seek a solution by negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional agencies or arrangements or other peaceful means of their own choice. Then Article 33.2 says, the Security Council shall, when it deems necessary, call on the parties to resolve their dispute by these means. So if you don't sort it out yourself, the Security Council will then get involved. We then discuss each of these options using examples, particularly the idea of good officers where a respected third party, like a Prime Minister of another state, retired ambassador, one of the elders, for example, seeks to encourage negotiations and verification for compliance. Then we talked about judicial settlement. So the ICJ statute is annexed to the UN Charter. So that means the ICJ is part of the UN. It's the judicial organ of the UN. And it acts as a judicial arm of the UN when there's disputes between states. And because of the way international law is set up, ICJ respects sovereignty and operates on the basis of consent. So all members of the UN are parties to the statute of the ICJ under Article 93.1. All members of the UN. It hears disputes between states and individuals or NGOs cannot usually be heard or filed by the court. So they have two main activities or areas of jurisdiction. They have the contentious jurisdiction, so they can hear legal disputes between states, and then remember they have advisory opinions, the ability to issue advisory opinions. So the ICJ statute, Article 36 says, the jurisdiction of the court comprises all cases which the parties refer to it, so the parties have to ask the ICJ to get involved, or all matters provided for in the Charter, so that's if the Security Council refers things to the ICJ, or if the ICJ is the dispute resolution named in a treaty. Right, so also we know that states can opt in to ICJ jurisdiction as Australia has done. So it basically says they will always submit themselves to the jurisdiction of the ICJ, and remember Australia had a reservation around maritime boundaries. So it's really important that you understand the way a case comes to the ICJ and what powers the ICJ has. Really important, right? You need to have a section in your notes that explains what the ICJ is and what it does. Can't hint any better than that. So. Right. It's fundamental. If you're talking about international law, then this is the High Court of international law, right? You need to understand that it is an unusual jurisdiction, operates on consent, decisions aren't binding, judges go through elections, they're elected, they vote, they don't decide things, they vote on things, and states can appoint their own judge for the period of the case, so the states can appoint their own ad hoc judge for the period of the case. Alright, so we also talked a lot about international arbitration, and remember Teresa's amazing lecture, which you should all go over. So Article 37 of the Hague Convention, it says international arbitration is the settlement of disputes between states by judges of their own choice. So you can have public law international arbitration, like the Rainbow Warrior dispute between France and New Zealand, for example, that's the one I often say, or you can go to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. So this is about when states arbitrate their own issues. So that has famously just heard a dispute between China and the Philippines over the South China Sea, but also between Timor and Australia. We've also talked about international commercial arbitration, which is a different thing. Quite a few of you seem to have got a bit confused about this. Arbitration between private companies, which is based on the New York Convention. So international commercial arbitration is often ad hoc, binding on the parties, doesn't set a precedent, and doesn't allow for appeal of any kind. Usually based on the UNICITRAL model rules, and they appoint particular arbitrators just to decide that particular issue. So we talked about the Australian Centre for International Commercial Arbitration or the International Chamber of Commerce. So the reason companies might prefer commercial arbitrations to domestic court actions are basically around enforceability due to the wide ramification of states by the New York Convention, under which states agree to enforce arbitration awards. So remember, that was the primary reason why people